Good morning. Happy birthday, United States of America. I'm delighted everybody is here. Despite the circumstances, I applaud you for being here. This is one of the most important days in the history of our country. And we're delighted that you decided to come out and sweat with us. So we're delighted to have you. We have an outstanding program planned for you this morning. I think this is our 8th reading. What a wonderful day to start off the 4th of July right here in the reading of the Declaration of Independence. So, here we go. Sit down. Have special things going on. The Fort Sumter camp of the DAR has flags for you. Teresa, where are you?
Right here.
You know American flag. She's got it right there. So appreciate the help on that. All your cohorts as well. At this time, I call for the invocation by our chaplain, Captain David Butler, United States Navy, retired, and pastor of St. John's Lutheran Church.
Let us pray. Most gracious and holy God, it is you who created all that is, that has ever been, that shall ever be. It is you who, looking out over your creation, deemed it time to create humanity and to place man and woman in paradise. It is we who, through our sinfulness, lost our place in that paradise. In your goodness, God, you have continued to claim us as your children, hold us in your hands of love, and nurture us under the wings of your protection. You created us in your image and offered blessings beyond our needs, our hopes, or even our dreams. In humanity's desire to worship you, we have sought places and lands where we could pray as we liked and praise you without fear. This land, these United States, offered that freedom and other freedoms that humanity needs as we bow our heads in reverence. Today we gather to hear again the declaration of freedom this great land has been founded upon, to celebrate the freedoms of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the joy of knowing only you as our God, and living without fear of unjust rule. You only, O God, are worthy of our worship. So bless us again, Lord God, with your presence, and place your hand upon us as we celebrate and recall a birth of freedom in this great land, a land of your creation. And as we determine to defend that freedom today and for all the days to come, unite us as a people and as a nation, God, as united us in our beginnings. And help us to see that the future is bright when we stand as the United States of America. This we pray in your most holy name, O God. Amen.
Now have the singing of the national anthem by John Arthur Siegling.
I invite everybody to join in singing our national anthem with me. Flag is over here. Let's clasp hand to heart and wholeheartedly join in singing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say
time, I'd like to introduce somebody who really doesn't need any introduction, our Mayor, John Tecklenburg, who I personally want to thank for allowing us to do this today. Mayor Tecklenburg.
Thank you, General. Happy birthday, America! Yeah. Thank you for being out. And in just a few minutes, we will hear of the usurpations of the King of Great Britain. And what an unprecedented year we live in. This year is Charleston's 350th birthday. I must admit we had some other plans to celebrate that birthday this year that have not come about because of the usurpations of the coronavirus. So I just ask you to join me in the fight for freedom and independence from the coronavirus. Yes. So wear that mask. Use the mask hygiene, and together, y'all, in the city, our numbers have been growing. We need to be mindful not to catch or spread this contagion. God bless and happy 4th of July to everyone.
Again, someone who needs an introduction, our longest serving mayor, a great friend, Citadel grad, Joe Riley, Jr.
Thank you very much, General, and lifelong friend, Henry Siegel. My pastor and bishop in his homilies would make 3 points. This will be very brief, but I'm going to make 3 points. Number 1, we're here because of Henry Siegel. Because Henry Siegel had this idea that on this historic site, where the Declaration of Independence was first read in our community and among the first in America, that we should, on the 4th of July, recite and recommit ourselves to the Declaration of Independence right here. So he didn't just have an idea. He went ahead and got it done. An important lesson to all of us. Ideas are great. Action is what moves the world. Henry, thank you for what you did. We're all indebted to you. And this will always be a part of a tradition in Charleston because of what Henry Siegel did and a wonderful patriotic way to celebrate the 4th of July. The second point, in this time of great spirit and relaxation is that we must remember that the signers of the Declaration of Independence were in fact signing their death warrant. For if the war had been lost, they would have been hung. As Benjamin Franklin said to the group, he said, we better hang together because if we don't, we're going to hang separately. So they were risking their lives to create this wonderful new invention in the world, a democracy in our country. It was tough and they were courageous. We must respect and honor that always. And the third point is this. A little more than a decade after the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States was written. And the first words are, in order to form a more perfect union. The statement and the action of independence was important. Now they had to perfect it. And that has always been the challenge and spirit in our country, that we make our country better. Each decade, each year, each century, we make it more perfect and more just and more successful. So I think this year, when we have seen the challenge we face in America of making this a more just nation, and that we make it a more racially inclusive nation, and we make stronger statements and actions about our respect and love for our fellow countrymen and women of whatever color or background. That's in furtherance of the goal to make a more perfect union. We resolve ourselves on this wonderful 4th of July celebration as one of the most historic sites in America, that we do as our founding fathers would have insisted. We do our part to make this a more just and more perfect country. Thank you very much.
The history of today's reading will be brought to us by Dr. Nick Butler from the Charleston County Museum, an outstanding speaker and historian. We're truly lucky to have him with us today. Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Henry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you again on this beautiful 4th of July to celebrate what has been a Charleston tradition for 244 years ago. So some of you know that at the Charleston County Public Library, I have a podcast called Charleston Time Machine. And I'm not trying to just promote myself, but I want to mention that last year I stood right here and gave a speech about the events of 1776 and how the Declaration of Independence was delivered to the people of Charleston at that time. And this is a very historic spot. That speech turned into a podcast, into a blog essay, which you can find on the Charleston County Public Library website. Just look for the Charleston Time Machine. And I just want to briefly summarize that material to give you a sense of the context of the reading of the Declaration, and to emphasize one particular aspect of that occasion on today's anniversary. So the Declaration of Independence, as we know, was a draft, many weeks in production, finalized on the 4th of July, 1776 in Philadelphia. The Continental Congress sent printed copies of the Declaration of Independence to the capital of each of the new 13 states. Charleston, the capital of South Carolina at that time. We received our printed copy of the Declaration on Friday, the 2nd of August. Friday, the 2nd of August. The governor of South Carolina received it and ordered a public reading of it. And they had to plan this event, just like today's event. It took several days. So on Monday, August 5th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was read aloud to the people of Charleston on 3 separate occasions. The first occasion, at noon, in front of the State House, at the northwest corner of Broad and Meeting Streets, just behind you. So the audience for that first reading was the governor and his staff, and both houses of legislature for the South Carolina Assembly, and all of the civil officers, and the senior officers of the Continental Army who were in Charleston at that time, at the west end of Broad Street. It was read aloud to the people. And then, after that ceremony, the Declaration was brought here to the west side of the Exchange Building. About 1:30 in the afternoon, another group of gentlemen read aloud the Declaration of Independence to the Charlestown Regiment of Militia, stationed here at the east end of Broad Street, accompanied by hundreds of the townsfolk spreading out around East Bay and Broad Street, filling out this area. After that was done, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, on August 5th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was read again, a third time, not here in town, but in the suburbs, on the northeastern fringes of Charleston, at a place called Liberty Tree. So the Liberty Tree is a site that has been forgotten by so many people. But I want to briefly review what happened there and talk about the importance of the Liberty Tree. At 3 p.m., Major Barnard Elliott of the 2nd Regiment of the South Carolina Continental Army read aloud to the Continental soldiers assembled there under the overspreading branches of this magnificent ancient live oak tree that was in Mr. Mazeek's pasture. accompanied by hundreds of townsfolk who came out to hear the new declaration. After the reading, the Reverend William Percy read aloud a sermon suitable to the occasion, after which all of the soldiers fired their muskets and shouted in joy at the announcement of the birth of our new nation. The Liberty Tree was in many ways a lightning rod for the public spirit that bound like-minded Americans to the cause of liberty and of independence in the 1770s. It was, in a manner of speaking, a very sacred place off the beaten path, dedicated to the contemplation and celebration of very noble ideas. So on that occasion, after Major Elliott read the Declaration, and after William Percy read his sermon, the Liberty Tree continued to be a site for gatherings on all patriotic occasions, celebrating American victories and persevering in the American cause. So on this occasion of the anniversary of the birth of our nation, I encourage you and invite you to remember the legacy of our Liberty Tree, just like similar Liberty Trees in Boston, New York, Newport, and other communities. The men who first gathered under its branches in 1766, a decade before the Revolution, made a pact to remain alert in the face of adversity and to remain united against oppression. 26 men gathered around this giant oak tree in Mr. Mazique's pasture, joined hands, and took a solemn oath to protect each other. That solemn oath we know from a letter written to Thomas Jefferson in 1817. We know that solemn oath was just 3 words: we will resist. That commitment to vigilance and mutual support is, I believe, at the heart of what we call the American spirit. The forefathers decided to fight for independence and to create a new frame of government for this land. It is our inheritance, but it sprung from the ancient roots of that tree of liberty. Between 1766 and 1780, Charlestonians gathered at the Liberty Tree on many occasions to plot the pathway to freedom and to celebrate their victories. And for these reasons, the British government viewed our tree as an obnoxious venue for subversive behavior. Their goal was to eradicate American resistance by force and intimidation. After capturing Charleston in the summer of 1780, British soldiers chopped down and burned our Liberty Tree. But despite their efforts to silence the voice of civil liberty, the American spirit has prevailed. Our new and imperfect union survived that trial by fire and others, and it continues to this day. In the decades after the War of Independence, some members of this community remembered the importance of our Liberty Tree. They dug up its stump. They fashioned souvenirs from its roots, and they erected in 1905 a bronze plaque to mark its location. If you'd like to know precisely where the Liberty Tree was, you can read an essay I just put on the Charleston County Public Library website last night. So look for the Charleston Time Machine, Remembering the Liberty Tree. If you go and stand at the corner of Alexander and Charlotte Street and face east towards the Cooper River, and then turn just a little bit farther south, looking towards the aquarium, you are within 50 to 60 yards of the Liberty Tree. You would have been within earshot of Major Elliott barking out the Declaration of Independence. The Liberty Tree was a metaphorical symbol for our community. It was an ancient, firmly rooted trunk that spawned many different branches. It was a living entity that required constant care and occasional pruning. It was a shelter in times of storm and a shady resort in good times. It was a reminder of our mutual interdependence. We are all members of one body, one nation, predicated on the notion that all are equal. and all are endowed with certain inalienable rights. More than 250 years ago, like those men who gathered at the Liberty Tree, we must continue to persevere against forces that attempt to divide and to discriminate. Their solemn vow still echoes today. We will resist. Thank you for this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless the United States.
At this time, I'd like to introduce to you those who will be reading from the Declaration of Independence today. Which you met the Mayor John Tecklenburg, the former Mayor Joe Riley. The next reader will be Lieutenant General Colby Broadwater, United States Army retired, Central Class of 1972, former U.S. Europe Command, Commanding General, 1st Army and U.S. Army NATO, presently the President of the American College of the Building Arts and a member of the WLI. Another one who needs no introduction, and if you've met him, then shame on you. Colonel Al Cannon, Esquire, Sheriff of Charleston County and WLI member. Yeah. Mr. Tony Yeomans, Director of the Old Exchange Building and Provost, and proud class of 1981 of the College of Charleston. Lieutenant Colonel Richard R. Shambo, Commander of our sister unit, the Sumter Guards and WLI member. Ms. Abigail Yeomans, daughter of Tony and Stephanie Yeomans, honor graduate of Butte Academy and rising freshman academic Magnet High School. Good to have some young folks up here. I got to tell you, look at him and you look at her, thank goodness she takes after her mama. Ms. Brittany Tula, architectural historian and professor at the College of Charleston. Mr. Graham Long, chief curator, Charleston Museum and WLI member. Highly decorated Vietnam veteran, Colonel Joe Dawson, who is a commandant of the Military Magnet School. He's been there and done that, sir. At this time, we will begin, Mr. Mayor.
The Declaration of Independence in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he is utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
I have friends that aren't in jail. You're one up, Henry. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for the establishment of judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone, for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace
standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states.
For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for readers in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
How have we been waiting in attentions to our British brethren? We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislators to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our corrections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessary which denounces our separation, and hold them as the whole, the rest of mankind, enemies in war, and peace brings.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Starts out as great and continues as it is now. Thank you for being here. Thank our readers for reading. Thank Tony Yeomans for allowing us this facility. Thank the mayor for allowing us to be here today. We will continue, WLI will march with this wreath to St. Philip's Church, where we will place it at the burial site of Edward Rutledge, an original signer of the Declaration of Independence. You're invited to follow us there for a brief service, at which time we will conclude. Tonight, you get ready to go to bed and fall on your knees. Thank God that you belong in the United States of America. Happy birthday, USA!